previously on the keys of time.
We now have the keys that are necessary to start to systematically unveil the Bible's chronology. The first two keys revealed the divinely ordained blueprint or framework for time, which governs the progression of God's plan. Keys 1 and 2 basically say that the blueprint is a week of 7 days of 1,000 years each. The next two keys resulted in the discovery of God's redemption chronology, which exists alongside the Bible's actual chronology. Key 3 says, at the end of every Jubilee cycle of 49 actual years, God adds a special 50th year of grace. This must be a measurement in the redemption chronology. Key 4 is the principle of unreckoned time, which says that God does not count times when his people's sin causes his plan of redemption to be suspended. This is convincingly revealed by the 479 completed years recorded in 1 Kings 6:1, which are 131 years short of the actual time. Now, the total times of servitude are also 131 years, so if they are subtracted from the total time, this gives exactly 479 years. The only alternative to this solution is to force the periods in Judges and Acts 13:20, which add up to 610 years, to fit into the 479 years of 1 Kings 6:1. This involves torturing the scriptures. On the other hand, when the key of redemption chronology with its unreckoned times is accepted, there is a perfect harmony of all the stated times. Again, this requires the existence of a separate redemption chronology in which the years out of fellowship are not counted. These latter keys define how time is reckoned on the redemption chronology. They are like counting the number of days of pay owed to an employee. Weekends are not reckoned because work is suspended then, that's key 4. But bank holidays, which are like jubilees, are added as extra days, even though no work was done. Hence they are days of grace. And this corresponds to key number 3. So whereas keys 1 and 2 define the structure of time that governs the redemption chronology, keys 3 and 4 tell us how redemption time, as counted by God, relates to actual time, as counted by man. This is important because the progression of time within God's overall blueprint is according to redemption time, not actual time. At the moment, we are only calculating biblical events to their year, although it's worth pointing out that in many cases the Bible tells us the actual day when an event happened. This is because of the precision of his cycles and his keeping of appointments on time and his use of feasts that are based on the position of the moon, which can be astronomically calculated. Exodus 12:41 is an example of the Bible's precision, even to the very day. It says, "And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, even the self-same day it came to pass, that all the hosts of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt." This shows that God's people kept accurate records of time, enabling them to make such a statement. Moreover, the fact that the Exodus took place on the very same day as when Abraham entered the Promised Land indicates that both of these major events took place on an important feast day, as indeed many divinely appointed events do. In this way we can understand how they noticed that the Exodus happened on the anniversary of Abram's entry into the land. Now, we can demonstrate the Bible's perfect accuracy over this period. Previously, we showed that Abram's birth must have happened on the opening day of the new redemption cycle, which was on Tabernacles, the 15th day of the 7th month. We've seen that the length of the cycle from his birth to the Exodus is exactly 505 years, and the time from his entry into the land to the Exodus is exactly 430 years. Therefore, the time from his birth to the entry into the land must have been exactly 75 years. In other words, he entered the land on his 75th birthday, which was therefore the 15th day of the 7th month, which is Tabernacles. It was indeed a feast day. This raises another apparent contradiction, which has a wonderful resolution that is important in reconstructing the Bible's chronology to the day. If Abram, you see, entered the land at the Feast of Tabernacles, that's the 15th day of the 7th month, then the Exodus, exactly 430 years later, must have been also at Tabernacles. Yet, it is well known that it took place at the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which is on the 15th day of the 1st month. The solution is the calendar change that God instituted 2 weeks before the Exodus as the new month was beginning. We read in Exodus 12, 1 and 2, "Now the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you." Often, a new dispensation is marked by a change of calendar. In this case, the change was in the start of the year, moving from the autumn to the spring. The original lunisolar calendar, which would have started after the flood, had its first month in the autumn. This makes sense, for this is when the agricultural year began, and originally farming provided the main need for a calendar. This is confirmed by the ancient Giza calendar, which started in the autumn. It reads, 2 months gathering, that's September-October, 2 months planting, November-December, 2 months late sowing, that's January-February, 1 month cutting flax, that's March, 1 month reaping barley, that's April, 1 month reaping and measuring grain, that's May, 2 months pruning, that's June-July, 1 month summer fruit, that's August. So originally the year began around the autumn harvest and the start of the rainy season, both of which signified the start of a new agricultural year. This means the Exodus, which happened in the spring, would have been in the 7th month. So the Exodus did take place on the 15th day of the 7th month of the original lunisolar calendar. But as this 7th month was beginning, God instructed Moses to call it the 1st month instead, so that from now on the new year for Israel would be in spring. This signified that the Exodus was a brand new start for God's people, the beginning of Israel's life as a nation, and from now on, every time that they started a new year, the first thing they remembered and celebrated through the main feast of the 1st month was their redemption from slavery at the Exodus. This connects also with the second purpose of this calendar change. It allowed for the introduction of the full set of feasts throughout the year in such a way that as Israel kept them in their correct order and at their appointed times, starting in the 1st month, they acted out a prophetic picture of what the Messiah would do and when he would do it. Thus, he would fulfill the plan of redemption in stages, first the feasts in the 1st month, and so on. This required the institution of a ceremonial year that started in the spring. Even so, there are remnants of the original autumnal year in the Bible and in Jewish tradition and practice. Jewish tradition says creation took place on the 1st of Tishri, which is now the 7th month. Most obviously, the first day of Tishri, that is the first day of the 7th month, is the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, literally the beginning of the year. Now we can understand this strange idea. Mishnah Rosh Hashanah 1:1 says, the 1st of Tishri is the beginning of the year for years, sabbatical cycles and the Jubilee. Exodus 23:16 says that the harvest feast of tabernacles in the 7th month occurs at the going out of the year. Likewise, Exodus 34:22 says this feast is at the turn of the year. Later, we will see that for the kings who reigned from Jerusalem, their regnal years started in Tishri, not Nisan. Moreover, in the evening after the Exodus, on the 15th day of the first month in the new calendar, but of course the 15th day of the 7th month in the old one, it says that Israel camped in Sukkoth. That's in Numbers 33, 3-5. Now, Sukkoth means booths or tabernacles, the very name of the feast of the 7th month. So at the Exodus, God saw Israel as fulfilling the feast of the 7th month, even though he had made it the first month to them. As they were fulfilling the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the new calendar, which is from the 15th day of the first month for a week, they were also fulfilling the Feast of Tabernacles on the old calendar. That's the 15th day of the 7th month for a week. Leviticus 23, verse 42 and 43 confirms this. This all confirms that the first month of Exodus 12:2 was originally the 7th month. That a 6-month calendar change happened at some time is well accepted. But now, through tracing the precise chronology of the Bible, we can understand exactly what happened. Abram was born on the 15th day of the 7th month, and he entered the land on the 15th day of the 7th month on his 75th birthday. And the Exodus took place exactly to the day 430 years after that, again on the 15th day of the 7th month. But at that time, God changed the calendar so that the 7th month became the first month, making the Exodus to be the 15th day of the first month on the new calendar. I hope you're gaining an appreciation of the precision and the perfection of the Bible's chronology. God initiated his covenant with Abram, which included the Promised Land, when he was 75, but he could not possess his inheritance immediately. Instead, he and his seed would sojourn as strangers in the land for a time. Thus there would be a length of time before they could enter their possession. At the same time as God gave Abram the covenant, promising him the land of Canaan in Genesis 15, he also told him how long this time period would be, and what would happen to them during this time. In Genesis 15, 13-16, we read that God said to Abram, "Know of a surety that your seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward they will come out with great substance." That's, of course, a prophecy of the Exodus. "In the 4th generation they shall come here again," that is, to possess the Promised Land, "for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full." Now the reason why Abram's seed could not possess the land for 400 years was that the nations in the Promised Land were not yet ripe for judgment, for their sin was not yet complete or full. But after the 400 years their sin became full, so that God could then remove them and bring Israel in to possess the land. This time period of 400 years ends with the Exodus, because it says, "Afterward they shall come out." Thus, at the Exodus, the time was up on the Canaanites, and Israel had the right to possess her land. It is important to notice that this prophecy concerns his seed rather than Abraham himself. It predicts that they will be sojourners in the lands of other nations, but that after the 400 years God would deliver them, so that they could return to the land as a conquering nation. This was fulfilled at the Exodus, when they became a free, sovereign nation in their own right. The land was theirs, for the Lord had given it to them by covenant. Genesis 15:18, God says, "Unto your seed have I given this land." And now that the 400 years was up, they had the right to take possession of that land. This is a picture For likewise, God promised to deliver mankind out of slavery and bring us into a great inheritance after 4,000 years. Right on time, he raised up Jesus, the prophet like unto Moses, to bring us out of bondage and bring us into our promised land. If you are in him, you have made your exodus out of Satan's dominion, and now the land of God's promises is yours. It's now up to you to enter in and possess it. Your time in Egypt is over. You have a legal right to possess the land. Take hold of what God has already given you. Enter in boldly and do not shrink back. The part of the verse that says, "and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them," which describes their time of slavery in Egypt, should be seen as a parenthesis. It's in brackets. In other words, it's not implying that the Egyptian bondage will last 400 years, which is impossible. You can check Galatians 3:17 to see that. No, you see, the primary point of the prophecy is to give the total time that the seed will have to wait before they can possess the land. During this time, they will be strangers in other people's lands. The secondary point is that for the latter part of this time, they will come under bondage and affliction to another nation, which was Egypt. But God will judge that nation, and they will escape and return to the land to possess it. Thus there would be 400 years sojourning, which included a time of bondage to Egypt. God indicated how long this bondage would last by saying, "In the 4th generation they shall come here again." This is clearly much shorter than 400 years, which is the total time of the sojourning. Immediately after this prophecy, God promises the land to his seed. That's in Genesis 15:17-21. But first, he needed to outline the whole period of 400 years before they could actually possess it. Stephen referred to these 400 years in Acts 7, verse 5 and 6. Verse 5 says, "He gave him, Abram, no inheritance in the land, no, not so much as to set his foot on. Yet he promised that he would give it to him for a possession, and to his seed after him, when as yet he had no child." Next, Stephen describes the time that Abraham's seed would have to wait before taking possession of the land, and that's in verse 6. "And God spoke on this wise, that his seed should sojourn in a strange land, and that they should bring them into bondage and entreat them evil for 400 years. Let me point that out again. God said that Abraham's seed should sojourn in a strange land for 400 years. Notice again that these 400 years of sojourning concerns Abraham's seed, not Abraham himself. This time would end when Israel would arise as a nation and inherit her land. That's what we see in the next verse now. "And the nation to whom they shall be in bondage, I shall judge, said God, and after that shall they come forth and serve me in this place." That's Acts 7:7. This describes events at the end of the 400 years when they escape in the Exodus and possess the land. Thus God showed Abraham that his seed would only be able to receive their inheritance after a wait of 400 years. It remains to ask, what event initiated these 400 years? We know that the time from Abraham entering Canaan and receiving the covenant at the age of 75 until the Exodus was exactly 430 years. Since the 400 years also ends with the Exodus, this time span must begin 30 years after he entered the land, when he was 105 years old. Now, since the subject of the prophecy was the seed, the start of this time period must have something to do with Isaac, who was the first seed. Now, Isaac was born when Abraham was 100. We saw that in Genesis 21:5. So this time span began when Isaac was 5 years old. This must be the starting point of the 400 years. Something of great importance in Isaac's life must have happened at this time when he was 5. Indeed, there is an event from Isaac's early childhood that is recorded and given great emphasis in both the Old and the New Testament. We read it in Genesis 21, verse 8 to 10. And the child, Isaac, grew and was weaned. And Abraham made a great feast the same day that Isaac was weaned. And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Wherefore she said unto Abraham, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman, who was Ishmael, shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. So 30 years after the covenant was given, Isaac, aged 5, was weaned. To wean is the word gamal, which carries a wider force than merely to wean that we have in English. It signifies to deal fully with. It's used in Psalm 13 verse 6. For a child, it covers the whole period of nursing and care until the weaning is complete, so that when it was finished it signified that the child had reached an important point of maturity, so that it was no longer totally dependent on its mother. In ancient times this period was much longer than now, extending to 3 years or more. Thus the completion of the period marked the end of the most critical stage of the child's life, and so it was celebrated with a feast, a custom that is still observed in the East. Although 5 years was certainly a long weaning time, it is understandable in view of the special attachment that Sarah would have had for her miracle baby, the promised seed, given by God when she was 90, after a lifetime of barrenness. She no doubt was protective, wanting to keep Isaac close. His late weaning could partly explain Ishmael's mocking of Mummy's boy during the celebration. An interesting comparison is that Hannah only handed her miracle baby Samuel to Eli in the house of God when he was weaned. That's 1 Samuel 1:24. He needed to reach a certain level of maturity, well, first to be of any service there, again probably between 4 and 5 years old. Hello, I'm Derek Walker. I'm the pastor of the Oxford Bible Church. Today I want to introduce you to what I believe is a very special book called The Keys of Time, a revelation of Bible chronology. This book will give you a thorough grounding in the exciting subject of Bible chronology, revealing the keys by which you can unlock the treasure chest of God's Word concerning its revelation of time. And so we start, you see, by looking at the major keys that will unlock this treasure chest, like the fact that all time is based on the creation week, and one day with the Lord is as 1,000 years, and we look into the Jubilee and how that also unlocks how God measures time, and we look at the principle of unreckoned time. And as we see the whole revelation of God in history and time fit together perfectly, we will get out of this, we'll get a revelation of the glory of God as the sovereign Lord of time, the God who is working out his purposes of grace in his perfect time, according to his redemption timetable. So through this book, God will impart to you a rich understanding of the times, giving you a fresh revelation of the special time in which we're now living near the end of the age. And it will prepare you for the momentous events that are just ahead, because we are living in the last days, and we need to understand the times that we're living in, and we need to understand God's revelation of time in the Bible. And having discovered the keys and God's framework of time, we then go through each period of history, starting from Adam to Abraham, and then from Abraham to the Exodus, and then from the Exodus to the dedication of Solomon's temple, and then the period of time leading up to the decree to restore Jerusalem by Artaxerxes, and then finally Daniel's 70 weeks that take us to the coming of the Messiah himself and his death and resurrection. We look and we show how all the pieces fit together perfectly into God's framework of time. And by the end of the book, you will know how to get the date of every event, every major event in the Bible, and how all these events fit together. And so this will enrich your understanding of the whole Bible and how it all fits together perfectly. And there are DVDs that go with this book that will enhance your study of it.